Morning, morning everyone, and welcome to the Inclusive Growth Extended Delivery Partnership session today. We've got a fairly busy agenda, but really glad that you're able to join us. I think some of our guests have been asking questions about whether we can see them or not. Just for your information, all of the microphones and video of people attending the session other than the panelists are switched off. But we are recording this event, and so you'll have given your assent to do that, and we will be posting the event on YouTube as well, so people will be able to pick up on it afterwards if they've not been able to attend today. And we'll also, as I said in the chat, that we will be sharing the slides from today's session. Eve's just going to pop up the agenda just so you can see how it will work today. We're going to hear shortly from the new Executive Member for Economy, Culture and Education, Councillor Jonathan Pryor, and then Eve's going to give us a brief update on where we are with inclusive growth activities within the city. If you've got any questions for Councillor Pryor or Eve, could you pop them in the chat function, because we're saving the Q&A for the session with Tom Riordan, the new Mayor Tracy Brabin and Councillor Pryor, which we're hoping to start around 10:30. And then after we've had that session, we will hear from Simon Foy and Mike Eakins about the new city plan and the proposals to develop that and align it with the three main pillars of inclusive growth, health and well-being, and climate change. And then we'll be aiming to finish just around 12 o'clock, because I'm sure other people have got other plans or meetings to go to. So if I could hand over at this point to Councillor Pryor, and we can hear from the new Executive Member for Economy, Culture and Education. He's also the Deputy Leader of Leeds City Council, if you didn't know that. Morning, Councillor Pryor, over to you.
Morning. Thanks, Nigel. So I just want to welcome everyone here today. As Nigel says, I'm the new Deputy Leader of Leeds City Council, and also the Executive Member for Economy, Culture and Education. I've been on the Executive Board for a few years now, and previously my portfolio covered education and employment, and I thought that link was really important to make sure that we were working to make sure that the young people coming through the education system were kind of ready for the world of work. And I'm really pleased that not only have I kept those, but I've also picked up what used to be Councillor Blake's portfolio in the economy and culture. Now, obviously, a main element of the economy element of the old economy portfolio was about inclusive growth. Now, inclusive growth is about ensuring all people and communities can contribute towards and benefit from our economy. We want to tackle inequality through low pay, in-work progression, improving skills and opportunities, supporting all sections of our society into better jobs, supporting people to live healthy and active lives, raising skill levels, and improving the health of the poorest the fastest. And I remember after it was kind of late last year, we had a discussion about as we recover from COVID, as the economy recovers, what do we want to look at within inclusive growth? Do we need to change our priorities? And actually the conclusion we came to wasn't that we needed to change our priorities, but actually that our priorities were doubly as important now. You know, what we were working towards before would be even more vital as we seek that kind of economic recovery. So when we look at kind of the employment aspect of our council, previously we were very much geared towards those furthest from employment, and while they'll remain a priority, obviously that landscape is going to change. It was reported today that we've got the worst labour shortage since 1997, with a combination of a rush to reopen, a drop in overseas workers, but at the same time that the furlough period is going to slowly come to an end. So we may expect an increase in unemployment there. So what we may have is a city where we've got a large amount of highly employable people, we've got lots of jobs, and our focus really has to be on turning people around and getting them right back out there while keeping true to our inclusive growth objectives. So that's kind of a starting point for me, for today, what we're working on with inclusive growth. So I hope you do get a lot out of the session today, and you're all very welcome. Thank you.
That's great to hear, Councillor Pryor, and it's great to hear the passion as well about making sure that we can deliver growth and opportunities to all of our communities in the city, and I think that will be very, very welcome. I think it will continue the good work that the team's already been doing, and it's really good to hear your views and how you want to make that a real priority for the council. Eve, it'd be really good to hear now if you could give us an update on what we've been doing on inclusive growth and how we've been progressing with some of those activities. So I'm just going to hand over to you if that's okay.
Thank you, Nigel, and good morning, everybody. My name's Eve Roothouse. For those of you that I haven't met before, I lead on culture and economy at the council. Culture was added to my portfolio in November along with employment and skills, which is a great kind of intersect between the two areas, and an area which I think will help us in good stead as we're coming through recovery. If like me, you were up late last night screaming at the TV and getting excited about even getting into the finals, hopefully you're awake now and ready to hear about all the fantastic work that's going on across Leeds in terms of working through economic recovery. But before I give you a bit of an insight into some of that, I just wanted to ground us in economic context in Leeds and what's sort of going on at the moment. So previously at some of these sessions, we talked a little bit around unemployment and what the situation is around that and how COVID-19 has changed things. So the information that we're able to get hold of is both furlough figures and universal credit claimant count in Leeds. And you can see that back in January, when we had our big national lockdown, we had a significant number of people in Leeds on furlough, over 51,000 people. But that number is going down, and obviously as restrictions have lifted, we've seen a dip as businesses are reopening. And what is encouraging is that the claimant count also decreased in April and May. So as people are coming off furlough, that would indicate that they are going back into work and not all going into a situation of unemployment. So there is some reason to be positive around how things are moving forwards. However, we're seeing some really interesting changes happening in the labour market that we need to be quite mindful of, that suggest that people have left the workforce or moved into different parts of the economy, which is creating some real challenges for areas like hospitality, where people may have gone into other parts of the economy and not returning into that space. But that also presents an opportunity for us to think about how we can support people that are out of work to get into those areas. And that's why we need to think really carefully about how our employment and skills activity is helping those people get back into work as we reopen. The other areas where we are able to have quite a lot of information is around things like footfall across the city centre, but also now with some additional footfall counters we've brought into the city to get a sense of some other locations. And in the city centre, footfall is down roughly about 29% compared to 2019. And it's been fairly steady like that as restrictions have lifted. But the interesting factor is that what we're hearing from some of our partners in the city centre is that actually spend is up comparatively. So whilst footfall might be down, there is still a significant amount of spend, and particularly with high-end brands. So if anyone has walked along Briggate recently, you'll notice there seems to be a never-ending queue for Louis Vuitton. I walked past it, I certainly wasn't in it, but it's interesting that how COVID has affected different groups in different ways, and that's then playing out in the economy. There's other kind of really positive things that have been happening in Leeds in our economy since we last met in this forum that it's worth just highlighting. So of course, the UK Infrastructure Bank was announced in the budget in March and has actually already launched in Leeds on the 17th of June. They've got an interim office location. We've had colleagues up to the city visiting us on quite a regular basis. Tom has hosted colleagues from the Treasury and from the UK Infrastructure Bank personally over the last couple of months, and they're moving with real pace. So they're actively recruiting their chief executive at the moment, and then we can expect to see other jobs starting to flow through. We've also been talking to the Bank of England about their plans for a new northern hub in Leeds, and they're a bit further behind the UK Infrastructure Bank in terms of their timelines, but again, very exciting, a lot of alignment with our values as a city in terms of diversity and inclusion, and what they want to achieve through their move. And add to that other announcements that we've had over the last few months around DWP confirming Leeds as their second HQ, the Department for Transport looking to move staff into Leeds, rail investment, and the BBC move. And there's a lot of positive optimism around the city. The other thing I'd say is there's about to be some announcements around some private sector organisations that are HQing themselves in Leeds that are really exciting businesses to join the city, but then they're still at this stage confidential. So look out for those coming through as well. It's not just about those public sector moves. And a couple of other things just on the economic context at the moment. The EY's UK Attractiveness Survey put Leeds 7th in the country, and actually our foreign direct investment has dropped in the Yorkshire and the Humber by much less than other regions, which is, it sounds like strange, but is a positive given the context of in 2020. So I think there's a balance for us to remember, which is that broad-based economy puts us in that great position for being able to recover. But we have to make sure that we have got our attention and alertness on all the things that we set out in our inclusive growth strategy to ensure that as we recover, we don't build in inequalities into the process, which is what we set out in our economic recovery framework back in the autumn. So I'm just going to give a little bit of a update now of some of the things that have been going on around the three themes in the economic recovery framework. So the economic recovery framework has three themes in it: respond, reset and renew, and build resilience. So just to give you a flavour of everything that's going on, in terms of continuing to respond to the COVID-19 situation, looking at that through the inclusive growth lens, there's been a huge amount of partnership working that's gone on across the council, but with external partners too, to make sure that the city kind of reopened really safely through April and May, and that people felt confident returning into the city centre. Just the level of detail, looking at new signage, enhanced cleaning regimes, new improved public spaces, getting activities out onto Briggate during half term, making sure that we had increased pedestrianised areas, I think has been hugely successful, and only down to really great working with everybody right across the city. And that's been the same in the local centres as well, not just the city centre. And hopefully many of you on the call have been into your local centre or city centre since reopening and felt confident and safe in doing so. Colleagues in the council work closely with public transport across the city as well, in terms of monitoring the situation around bus capacity and looking at what's happening on trains. And just to reassure all of you, there are enhanced cleaning regimes going on both by train operators and bus operators. Bus operators are moving buses onto busier routes to help with capacity and to try and ease all of that piece. And having travelled myself personally on the train quite a number of times since things have reopened a little bit, certainly feels cleaner than it ever did before COVID, and I've certainly felt quite safe. In terms of kind of promoting the city to support our hospitality and retail businesses and culture, we have a Visit Leeds campaign that we launched on the 21st of June, and a fantastic piece of partnership working that's gone on there. The Be Our Guest campaign, working with Leeds Hotels and Venues Association. There are 14 hotels participating in that, where people can book a 3-for-2 night offer, and they get a fantastic independent hamper if they are one of the first to book. And the team were just working out the logistics of getting those delivered to some of the first people that have booked over the coming days. And then finally, on Respond, the work around business grants has been ongoing. So since November, the council has awarded over £125 million worth of business grants out to businesses. And in addition, we've been able to use some of our flexible grant monies to launch Leeds Inspired Live, which was about trying to support freelancers and small cultural organisations to put on live events over the summer. And we've also been able to provide some support to Arts at Leeds grants recipients and do some work around supporting our innovation ecosystem. So that work continues, and we'll continue to respond throughout the rest of this this year in terms of how we support businesses. Just checking how I'm doing for time. So if I move on to just give you a bit of a flavour around what we're doing around reset and renew. So when we set out the economic recovery framework, we talked about the fact we'd need to make sense of where we've got to as a result of the acceleration of trends in the economy that COVID-19 created. We'd need to make sure we had the right projects in place. And if we have a project underway, did we need to pivot it and change things around? So having set that out in the autumn, there are a number of pieces of work that have been progressing since then. So the first is a piece of work around the future of our city and local centres, and hopefully many of you have contributed to that. There are a number of pieces of work under that are coming together now. So we worked with the core cities and key cities across the country on a report which was delivered at that national level around cities and the role, city centres and the role in recovery. We commissioned Arup to do a piece of work in partnership with us locally for Leeds, covering both the whole of Leeds, so all of the local centres and the city centre. That report is coming to a conclusion at the moment. And we also ran a city conversation, which is where I hope many of you contributed, and all of that is feeding in. And finally, we're working with the Ahead Partnership, who some of you may know on the call, work with young people across the city, and we're engaging people to think about finding their local centres, and that piece of work will kick off in September. So all of that will be coming into some recommendations that will be made to council in September to help inform all that we need to do and how we need to work with partners to ensure that our city and local centres thrive in spite of the changes that we've seen in terms of the impact on retail and the changes that are going through in that way. We're also kicking off a really exciting piece of work in September around looking at future talent. So Councillor Pryor talked about the need for us to make sure that people have got the right skills to get back into work, but also we need to make sure that people can capitalise on the opportunities that are there. So I'm sure we've got some people on our session today who are from the digital sector, which is an example of a sector that has been hugely resilient through COVID. It's growing really rapidly, wants to diversify its workforce, and is really proactive. Many digital businesses are very proactive actually about trying to bring people in through different routes. So it's about us as a city working together with both employers, skills providers, and our citizens to really make sure that businesses can thrive, individuals can thrive, and we've got the right paths for them to be able to get into those jobs. So come September, we really value your input and engagement into that piece of work to make sure that we can come forward with a plan collectively that means we can achieve that. Just touching briefly on innovation, we said in the economic recovery framework that innovation was going to be really important to us to help with recovery. And the work that we did as part of being part of the Massachusetts Institute of Technology Regional Entrepreneurship Accelerator Programme, or MIT REAP, has stimulated a lot of new conversations with partners on how to strengthen our innovation ecosystem. And last year and through this year, we launched both the Idea Community, our Build Accelerator, and now we just launched this week Build Your Future, which is targeted at young people, and it's a programme over the summer to really encourage young people to start to think about innovation. And perhaps the team can put the details in the chat actually, so that you can share that with your contacts, because that's a fabulous opportunity, and the deadline's coming up in the next day or so. All of that work is set around an objective for Leeds to become the place where people want to come and solve the biggest global societal challenges of our time, and where our people can get involved in that focus. And also that we aim to have the most diverse set of entrepreneurs anywhere in the world. And I don't say that lightly, that is our firm commitment. And if you look at the entrepreneurs that we were able to support through our Build Accelerator, we're making the first steps towards that. So that's really hugely exciting. We're also doing some work at the moment to refresh our view on innovation infrastructure in the city, looking at the area that we've called the Innovation District around the university and the LGI site, the Leeds General Infirmary site, and refreshing our thinking around that in light of COVID and in light of where we are now in terms of government funding and the national policy position as well. Two more things on reset and renew. Although the UK may no longer be in the European Union, it hasn't stopped Leeds' desire to cooperate with international partners, both in Europe and beyond. And we ran a really successful Global Leeds campaign through March, April and May, just to ensure that our profile was maintained in that respect. And we'll continue to kind of carry on that work into the future. That's included working with our partners to refresh our memorandum of understanding with our sister cities in Europe, which are Dortmund, Lille and Brno in the Czech Republic. And then finally, we're quite close now to having the Social Progress Index populated for a first time for the city. The Social Progress Index is the measure that we're testing alongside GDP to give us a complementary view of how our economy is progressing in order to be able to see how we're succeeding or otherwise against delivery of inclusive growth. I've got keep on time so we're not late for Tracy. So just touching on build resilience and giving you all a bit of a view of what's happening around the city on this area. In the economic recovery framework, again, what we said is we must not lose sight of our long-term strategic aims, delivering inclusive growth, delivering on our health and wellbeing strategy and meeting our net zero targets. And so colleagues right across the council have been working on some major projects, both during the last period of lockdown, but moving forward. So just to give you a few highlights, the Regent Street flyover, you can see the images there on the top right, a major engineering project to replace that old piece of infrastructure that had to be replaced. It ended its lifespan, that has been quietly going on whilst we've been in lockdown, which is perhaps a sort of one of the kind of upsides of us being at home during this period of time, is that people that probably live on the east side of Leeds and did rely on that road avoided perhaps traffic jams during that period. But a phenomenal piece of work going on. Sturton Park and Ride is near completion for September, which is the bottom left picture. We've been busy working on the next stage of the flood alleviation scheme. So that includes £122 million of flood defences approved in May that will go along the River Aire right up to Malham in the Yorkshire Dales, with tree planting and coming back into the city with the construction of a flood storage area between Horsforth and Riordan. And then moving forwards on our vision for the city that's set out in our spaces strategy. So some of you might have been fortunate enough to walk past Cookridge Street recently. So that's the area outside the Radisson Hotel. I walked past there yesterday and it was almost as if that's been a green space for years and years. There were tens of people sat on the benches and the wall enjoying that space. And one of the next stages around our spaces strategy is the transformation of City Square, and you can see the outline design on the top left there on the slide, which will be coming forwards over the next couple of years. So huge amount of work going on from colleagues right across the council in moving forwards on those projects. And I'm just really kind of touching the tip of the iceberg there with those examples. Two final things I wanted to touch on was first the full fibre rollout. So digital infrastructure is really fundamental to our success as a city going forward, and that's probably everyone's probably pretty mindful of that after the time we've spent in lockdown. And through a partnership between Leeds City Council and BT, we're connecting around 1,400 sites across the whole district. So that's Leeds City Council sites, schools, GP surgeries and so on. And that full fibre rollout then makes it commercially viable for the rollout to go into other parts of the community, and it also enables 5G. And that means that we've got commercial companies also investing in Leeds. And we're already at a stage in Leeds where 86% of premises can access a gigabit capable connection, and the UK average is 42%. So that's really quite significant for us in our future. And then finally, since we last met, Leeds 2023 have launched their Year of Culture, the Letting Culture Loose, which is really exciting and presents a fabulous opportunity for us to really celebrate all that's fabulous about Leeds in 2023. So I encourage you to take a look at that if you haven't already, and to get involved, because the Culture Trust are now in a position where they have grants that they're putting out for work. They're working really proactively with communities right across the city. So please do find out more about that, and maybe at a future session we'll invite them along as well. So I think I've just hit 10:30. Whoa. So the sort of summary position is just that we continue to do the work to kind of reset and renew our policy and projects for economic recovery, making sure that we're aligning with wider strategic priorities. In the longer run, we will be looking to refresh the inclusive growth strategy alongside the work that's being done around a city plan, which you're going to hear about later on in the agenda. So Nigel, that's me. I'll stop sharing my screen. I don't know if there were questions or if you've got time for questions, because I wasn't looking at the chat.
No, we don't have time for questions, but we've asked them to go into the chat for you, Eve. I mean, okay, I think great. Remarkably well, to be honest, getting through the amount of activities that's going on. If anybody thought that we weren't doing too much around inclusive growth and development in the city, I think that will have maybe changed their views. So I think it was a fantastic, and we are going to share the slides. And I think, as always, I know you and the team are more than happy to take questions outside of these sessions as well. So I thought it was absolutely fantastic. Okay. So well done. I'm amazed you managed to do it by 10:30.
Thanks, Nigel.
Really good, really great. It's great to see. I'd like to now welcome Tracy Brabin, the new Mayor of West Yorkshire. It's a real delight to have you with us today, Tracy. You're going to have a conversation with Councillor Pryor that Tom Riordan's going to host for us. But it's really good to see you here. You're new to the role, very new to the role, so I'm sure you're still finding your feet. But you're going to give us a few initial thoughts in the role and what you're hoping to achieve, and how we can work with you to drive the inclusive growth agenda.
Thank you. Thanks for the invitation to speak today. And thank you for all that you're doing and have done in the last few years around this subject, because it's actually personal for me. Growing up in Howden Clough in Birstall in Batley, I grew up in a council flat with my family, 2-bedroom council flat. I was on free school meals all my life, and I was the first to go to university. And I've had an amazing career, 30 years in the creative industries, then 5 years as a Member of Parliament, and now it is my massive privilege to be the first Mayor of West Yorkshire and the first ever woman Metro Mayor in the country. So my journey has been extraordinary and amazing, and I'm hugely privileged to have had these opportunities. But I do know every opportunity that was given to me, whether that was free school meals, a free and brilliant library, social housing, money from the state, social security when I was starting out, sleeping on floors and sofas in London as a young actor with no drama school training, no family money and no contacts. It was the social security really kept the wool from the door. Free education. All of those things got me on my path. Now, I know, going back to my estate, I don't feel those young people have those same life chances. And I do feel a massive responsibility as we come out of this dreadful 15 months that we've had, and hopefully seeing some light at the end of the tunnel, that it is my responsibility, working with brilliant partners like yourselves, the talented leaders of the councils across West Yorkshire, to make sure that that recovery is fair and that it's just, because this isn't just about North and South, about levelling up North and South. This isn't just even about towns and villages versus cities. And let me tell you, as a Member of Parliament for towns and villages for 5 years, I really understand that feeling that all the good stuff happens in cities and you're going to have a better quality of life if you live near a city. It is also about within our communities, how we do that levelling up and have inclusive growth at the forefront of our minds, because it cannot be right that a child born today in Ilkley, for example, could potentially live 10 years longer than a child born in Savilletown in Dewsbury. So we have this probably once in a lifetime chance to really set the agenda for closing that disadvantage gap. And we know that COVID has had a massive impact on those who've already suffered from 10 years of austerity, young people in particular. Black, Asian, minority, ethnic young people in particular, and also women have really taken the brunt of the impact of COVID. So it's a great chance for us to put in strategies, to identify opportunities, to make that, to close that disadvantage gap, to ensure that social mobility that I was someone that benefited from that opportunity is available to all, because those youngsters on that estate need every chance to fulfill their destiny. And I don't know if I may just say, if you watched the football last night and you were impressed as I was by Sterling's performance, what an athlete, and the article that came out today that his mum worked nights as a cleaner while his 17-year-old sister took him on 3 buses to training. We have to make sure that every youngster across West Yorkshire has that opportunity to fulfill their potential. And it's a complex network, and it's about skills and pay and about access to opportunities. So it's about buses, it's about a warm, decent home, safe home. That's why I've committed to 5,000 sustainable and affordable homes to make sure that, as I did, you can have that security of tenure and you're not worried about being kicked out of your home if, as my dad did, kept losing his job. So it's a complex picture, but I know in West Yorkshire, we have an opportunity to really set the agenda on inclusive growth. Excited to be working with partners on this call to make that a reality. And I know that I've only sort of 3 years before the next election, but there's lots we can put in train before then. And I'm really excited to hear your questions, to have a conversation with Jonathan. I know Tom and Jonathan, and there's so many people on this call that really do understand this sector and the detail, the granular detail. So it's also a learning exercise for me today, but very interested to hear what you have to say. And hopefully you will hear from me about my direction of travel, and you will know that I'm absolutely behind your ambitions to have inclusive growth across our region. So thanks so much. Cheers.
Tracy, that was absolutely brilliant. I mean, the passion and the commitment and the just general sort of enthusiasm to make a change, a positive change and a positive difference is brilliant to hear. I'm glad I don't have to follow that, and I can hand over to Tom Riordan, the Chief Executive at Leeds City Council, to hold the conversation with you and Jonathan. So Tom, am I okay to hand over to you?
Yeah, that's great, Nigel. Thank you. And it's great to hear Tracy speak, the new mayor speak, and so eloquently, I think, about the issues that face us on this agenda. We absolutely, I think we may have just lost Tracy at this point, actually. So hopefully she'll reappear with the connection. But I was just going to maybe just reflect for a couple of minutes about. Just to add to it, I thought his presentation was brilliant as well, and very comprehensive. I guess just reflecting on the last 18 months, where I don't think it's overstating it to say the council flirted with not necessarily bankruptcy, but a very severe financial situation, and that the city was hit so hard by COVID and continues to be, the scarring from that continues with individuals we've lost and families who've been affected. It's great given what's happened to be starting to look ahead and to plan ahead for the future. But I think in doing so, we've got to recognise that the recovery will take some time, and there are going to be some bumps in the road, particularly in how we run public services and deal with the issues as they, as we emerge from this. There was a very good initial question on the chat from Hashim, I think it was, about potential job losses that are coming. We know that furlough is going to be ending. And I wonder, as we wait for Tracy to come back on, Councillor Pryor, whether you might want to start with that issue of, jobs, jobs and skills in the city, and, the challenges that lie ahead of us, I guess, with the current economic situation, despite all the positives that we know are there in Leeds.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think one of the strengths that Leeds really has is that diversity of employment. So it does mean kind of if one sector gets hit hard, it doesn't mean that the whole city gets hit. Obviously, one of the parts of my portfolio that I've taken over recently has been culture, and that's been really difficult because they were very much the first industry to close and the last to open. And I think people have realised just how many kind of supporting industries will follow that, through everything from your most obvious kind of bars and restaurants and everything in the city centre to all kind of like the production line, the full everything that supports that sector. And I think that's what some people have realised, how interconnected a lot of these industries are. I do think Leeds is recovering strongly after the past year and a half, but it is difficult. It's going to be difficult for everyone. We're not yet seeing that unemployment coming through in Leeds, but some of that may be, some of the people who maybe have lost their jobs. If they were better paid, they may not want to go on benefits yet. Sometimes it takes time. So I think we're not going to see the full impact of kind of some of the damage to the economy for a while yet.
Great, thank you. Welcome back, Tracy. Saw that
Thank you.
Yeah, you lost the connection, but it's great to see you back. Well, I was just saying that, it was great to hear you speak so eloquently about the issues of, inclusivity. And I read the Raheem Sterling story this morning as well. And I just think it's such a powerful, example of what practically a lot of people have to do to be able to, achieve their potential, and how you've got a lot of people relying on a family or extended family in those circumstances. And I guess one of the big issues about social mobility, which is something that you care passionately about, is some people have those networks in place, and have an inbuilt advantage almost, don't they, to have that support structure and that ability to travel and that ability to write a CV, to know how to engage, to maybe have connections through their family networks and other networks that others won't have. And that whole issue of social mobility is so central, isn't it, to the future of Leeds and West Yorkshire?
Well, there's no doubt about it. I hope you can hear me okay. But there's no doubt about it that when we have these cold spots across our region, we are losing talent. And if I may just say, a couple of years ago, we set up the Batley and Spen Youth Theatre. We did a production of Les Mis in response to Jo Cox's murder. It was her favourite musical. And we worked really hard to get youngsters from across the whole of Batley and Spen, including South Asian working class kids. Then we persuaded the National Youth Theatre to come and hold free auditions with bursaries for the element that is the London element, where people would have to pay, obviously, to live in London over the summer. And we got 9 young people into the National Youth Theatre. Now 3,000 across the country apply. And often it's those middle class kids. And I'm not disrespecting them, because they have talent as well. But their families have supported their journey. They've got them to class. They've bought the instruments. They've got them in the singing classes. And to get 9 youngsters There were 3 actors and the rest were behind the scenes because we'd mentored them during the production into the NYT. And they're now going on to drama schools and into careers, and they will have highly skilled jobs and they'll be able to follow their bliss. But they would not have had that opportunity without this theatre company. Now, that is just one small example, and we can find many, whether that's engineering or medicine or sport, that it is just about giving people the opportunity, but wrapped up into that opportunity is a decent home, is transport that works, is your parents being able to put food on the table because they've got a real living wage. And we know at the moment, we are at risk of going backwards, aren't we, Tom? With, I think it's 91% rise in claimant counts in Leeds alone, and a 90% increase in 16 to 24-year-olds. So as Anne Longfield has said, who was the Children's Commissioner, we are at risk of losing a whole generation, and we need a Nightingale moment for young people. And that's why so much of my commitments to my community has a focus on young people and their opportunities, and whether that is cheaper bus transport for youngsters, the entrepreneur scheme, £6 million for young entrepreneurs, skills and training, a digital academy for youngsters. There's a whole raft of things that are part of my manifesto commitments that will hopefully try and be that Nightingale moment for youngsters. But we also need the third sector and council leaders and businesses to help us, and to have that combined approach that we are all pulling in the same direction, all putting our shoulder to the wheel so that we can make life and those opportunities happen for youngsters. And it works for business too, because if they get those skilled workforce, then they can flourish as well. So I think it is a virtuous circle, and very happy to talk in more detail about the particular policies. But you're dead right that it's really important that we identify opportunity and give every chance to a youngster that doesn't have that family money, that doesn't have those connections, that potentially wasn't really brilliant at school because they didn't engage, or there were other challenges at home, and to give them those second, third and fourth chances to do well.
Absolutely. I also think your reference to, you've been the first from your family to go to uni is a big, I always say to people when you get a chance to go to graduation ceremonies and you sat there and there's like 1,000 people going past doing exactly the same thing, and it can be a bit, repetitive, but then you think of that individual and that family who's there, and especially if it's that moment where it's like the first one in generations who've done it, it is such a powerful thing for their future. And, the same with, I think, the FE sector as well is so important to us. And, the T levels that we're trying to develop with the health and social care sector. Councillor Pryor, I know that you care passionately about this agenda as well. And you've got the link between education and culture in your portfolio, which is really interesting and very, consistent with where the Mayor is coming from too.
Yeah, absolutely. And do you know what Tracy's talking about speaks to me really personally? So I was in the National Youth Theatre when I was younger, and when I got down there, it was a 2-week course down in London, and I was this kind of young northern boy, where my experience of this was amateur dramatics in kind of dusty church halls. We did Les Mis actually, among others, and I just part of me felt a little bit out of my depth, because some of the other people there were, they'd been on these incredible courses that cost phenomenal amounts of money. So part of me was like, oh my God, like, do I belong here? And then kind of after, for a few days, I was like, no, I absolutely belong here. Kind of, I had that passion for it. And I don't know, I'm sure there's something in it about kind of history on stage prepares you for the world of politics, but there's certainly something there. And then kind of when we look at Leeds and kind of how that culture and education link, there's one great example. Opera North have this programme where they go into schools, they give kind of the kids instruments, they do singing with them, kids who would never have this at all. And, their faces light up, they put on an incredible show. that's fantastic. You know, culture for culture's sake is amazing. But also, when you look at their attainment across maths and English, that kind of involvement in culture has had a tangible impact on their performance in all of the subjects. You know, it gives them a passion for learning. You know, when you look at something like music, there's so much maths involved in reading that, and it really prepares people in a better way. And I hope that will kind of take part in closing that gap. You know, that attainment gap we have in the city. You know, and other things Tracy said about kind of the free school meals and making sure that kind of actually kids have that absolute base level of what they need. And I've been so proud that over the past year and a half, Leeds as a council have ensured that children have had free school meals in every holiday. And you know, I know I don't want to get into kind of government U-turns because we might be here a while talking about those, but we kind of went forward and like made that pledge and made sure that was in our budget every single time the holiday was coming up, and we're looking to continue to do that in the future as well.
The one of the things that, sorry Tracy, did you want to come back in on that?
Yeah, I just want to say, isn't Jonathan a perfect example of art and creativity is not about making actors and, you know, jazz hands and getting on stage. What it's about is making our youngsters more confident, more articulate, having greater emotional intelligence, and having a confidence that you can buy it if you go to a really expensive school, or you can learn it and find it in yourself from creativity. And just to say that whilst I don't have any remit over schools, what's really important to me is the erosion of the arts subjects in schools, combined with the government cutting funding for arts subjects at universities. All of our youngsters who want to have self-expression, those opportunities are being narrowed on a daily basis. And the numbers of teachers for dance, drama, music, only art has kept the same numbers of teachers across the piece. We are letting our creative youngsters wither on the vine, because that's the only way they're going to have access is through the school. And if they can't afford to, you know, the auditions for drama school, they potentially want to do it at university, and then they can't afford to do it because the funding has been cut. You know, it's a double whammy. And this isn't about, as I say, actors. It's about better paramedics. It's about better and more empathetic doctors. It's about compassion and an understanding of humanity that you get from the arts. And the government's saying that they're offering music. Well, it's 6 ukulele lessons, and if you don't like the ukulele, then that's your last chance. So I'm hoping with my adult education budgets that we can maybe offer some of that cultural offer to, you know, for somebody who's maybe 21 or, you know, going back to education, as I did late in life. I went back to university and did a master's in screenwriting, which enabled me to stay at home with my kids, raise my kids and earn a living, rather than going on tour and leaving the family home. But I know how hard it was going back to uni. But I'm hoping that, you know, with this understanding that the cultural subjects are so valuable, that creative problem solving is going to be a real asset for businesses going forward into the world of work. We don't know what it looks like in the next decade, 2 decades. We're going to need those smart creative thinkers who have the emotional intelligence that you get sometimes, hopefully from the creative subjects. And I'm hoping that I can use my soft powers of convening around schools, but then also in adult education, to identify those courses that are going to help our communities get back on their feet. And it doesn't have to be creative subjects, but those subjects that will get you back into the world of work, give you that confidence again, and help you get on to the next step.
Yeah, I absolutely. I think that there's an interesting question as well, isn't there? Actually, Katie's just posted on the chat a link to a great programme that's been run through our fantastic MIT REAP initiative for 18 to 21-year-olds, the closing date at the 11th of July. So if any of you would like to direct people to that, that would be great. But I'm also struck by Joe's question about the over 50s. And, you know, I think imposter syndrome, for those of us sometimes from the north with, you know, interesting backgrounds, let's say. I remember, you know, imposter syndrome, and I still get a bit of it now at times where, you know, you're in a very different environment to the one that you're used to. And I think that can happen in later life as well. And, you know, there's a lot of people who've been affected by, you know, the economic situation, and also, you know, the pandemic, who'll be thinking about, you know, that there'll be jobs that won't reappear, but people might want to retrain and do something like you've done, you know, like you mentioned, Tracy, about how you help people as returners to work or trying to switch courses. What about Joe's question about the over 50s and adult education? Because FE colleagues, I think Bill's on the call, you know, in some ways FE you could argue over the last 20 years has been, you know, a bit underserved in terms of the investment gone in as a sector, and it is a big opportunity for us, you know, with the new partnership between the mayor and the councils to, you know, to move on that agenda for the over 50s and returners to work.
Well, I couldn't agree more, because what's really, really vital is those people who've been furloughed then lost their job, or, you know, in their mid-40s could potentially be looking at a future where they may never work again. And we're living longer, and the terror of potentially being out of work for 30, 40 years with still responsibilities and payments, it's horrifying. And that's why I think the focus for me is going to be on digital skills. This isn't just only about young people. It's about those small businesses getting that bricks and clicks to try and give them the skills to help their businesses expand. Individuals going back into the world of work, they may never have needed digital skills in their previous job. But going back now with the CV where you don't have any of those skills, it's really important that we offer it. That's why the Digital Academy is going to be pivotal. Whilst its primary function will be for disadvantaged kids, particularly girls, there is also an offer working with further ed and colleges outside of the Digital Academy for those, like you say, those returners. And women in particular who have potentially been caring for families, now looking to come back into the world of work, needing those skills. But I can't underestimate how powerful the imposter syndrome is, given I'd never been to Parliament before becoming a member of Parliament. And if you wanted to draw a picture of a mayor, you would draw a picture of a man. And definitely the imposter syndrome is alive and well in my house. We just have to keep thinking that you keep reaching and keep just being authentic and being yourself. And I'm just hoping that people then will trust you and believe in you as a leader. But certainly the over 50s are not forgotten. And I think looking at the world of work going forward, it's digital skills, but also the green sector. Now, we can really lead on this. Already, Yorkshire and Humber have done brilliant work on tackling the climate emergency. It is real. And I'm very proud that Labour councils have committed to zero carbon by 2038. But to get there, we have to reduce our carbon emissions by 50% every 5 years. So this is going to be hugely challenging, but also an opportunity, because hopefully we're bringing green businesses into West Yorkshire, and we will need the skilled workforce to deliver. So pivoting our brilliant manufacturing sector, who potentially have lost their jobs, into manufacturing in a different way, in a green, sustainable way, in those industrial heartlands, in the former mining pit villages as well. Where do we identify those skills, whether that's retrofitting homes, creating warmer homes, the components for solar panels or blades for wind turbines. I had a really brilliant visit to Switch, which is the green bus company. They manufacture green buses for London and across the world in North Yorkshire. But that workforce, really skilled workforce, lots of it is digital and computer tech when it comes to batteries. But I know that there is a place for apprentices, there's a place for returners in that chain of productivity. So I am aware of it, and certainly digital and green, I think, are potential opportunities for us there.
Yeah, the tech sector is one of our absolute strengths, I think, particularly in Leeds, and it's also it's growing. It's full of really energetic people. We've got some great female tech leaders in the city who are absolutely driving that diversity agenda themselves, and we're trying to do more on ethnicity and disability as well, and more to come there. But Councillor Pryor, do you want to come in on this issue as well?
Yeah, completely. I mean, all those kind of jobs and sectors Tracy just listed, like those jobs did not exist 10, 15, 20 years ago because just that technology wasn't there. Like whatever you think of it, those days where people have a career that they start at kind of 16, 17 and then just have for the rest of their life, like those jobs, they don't exist anymore. And I think this is why it's so important, that kind of lifelong learning. When equally you think about kind of where we're going to be in the next 20, 30 years. And it just shows that kind of the sort of skills we need from people aren't necessarily kind of the exact skills they will be using in the job. It's learning to learn. It's having that ability to constantly kind of have to learn something new, maybe kind of an element of critical thinking. You know, we're living in an age of, I hate to kind of say it, kind of fake news, and kind of learning how to evaluate the information you're getting and evaluate the validity of it. So having people who've got skills in kind of knowing kind of what to believe, knowing how to assess information, and being kind of flexible, those are so important. And I think, you know, adult education and the whole FE sector has got a huge role to play in that. And I do think it's not been given the priority nationally it should have done. But I do think kind of its profile is up and coming. And I think as a region and a city, we should really be pushing that.
Yeah.
If I could just say, Tom, that I just want to pay tribute to all those who work in FE, because it has been, you know, the poor sister, and it has been allowed to wither on the vine. The buildings are, you know, as they should be. The equipment isn't, you know, often the cutting edge, expensive stuff. But those lecturers who, you know, are working in very difficult conditions, trying to deliver those courses, they have done an amazing job, and they're going to be vital and to our growth. And I'm old enough to remember night school. The working people, the way that they got on and the way that they acquired knowledge was because they had to pay their bills, was to go to college at night. So we have to find those opportunities. That's why I'm heartbroken, actually, and angry that government have stopped Union Learn, because that means that people in the workplace no longer have that opportunity to, you know, get skills in the workplace. And that's why it's vital that we also hold on to our local libraries to make sure that everybody has access to information, because we're not all as plugged in as others when it comes to access to the internet, etc. And also learning is being also around others and having advice from great librarians, you know, being part of groups, writers groups or CV writing groups. It is sometimes a collective experience to do better and to get on and get in. I think, you know, it's really important that we make sure we have that audit of what is our library offer as well across the region.
Yeah, sure. And I think the colleges in Leeds probably, for me, if you look at the cohorts of young people who they train and educate, are probably, you know, the institution that's doing most to connect the most, you know, if you like, disadvantaged communities to the economy in the city. And I think that is fantastic, and we've got to do even more. I'm going to extend it a little bit. Really grateful for the questions that are coming through on the chat and the Q&A. Kate and Jack have raised some really, I think, pertinent questions about the role of communities and the third sector in the development of the economy. If I reflect back in that typically Leeds and Yorkshire way of saying the good things, but also being self-critical, I think on the health side, we've got, I think I'm really proud of the fact that we've got the third sector round the table on major decision making, and I think we've as a council actually pushed for that and persuaded NHS colleagues that would help decision making, and it has. I don't feel we've maybe achieved that on the economic side. We have great diversity on our LEP board now with Kate and Cully and others, but if you look at the way development happens in the city through the economic development, there's maybe more that we could do. But what's your view about that question? Maybe Councillor Pryor first, and then the Mayor Tracy, about how do we really get that greater engagement and not get developers and house builders and business to see the third sector and the community as fundamental, not a sort of CSR add-on at times. That's a bit unfair to that sector, but if I'm exaggerating to make a point.
Yeah, I think it's different it's going to be different for different projects and for different industries. I think one great example of where we did bring people in was around the climate agenda, where we had the citizens jury, and we had a cross section of people from across the city. They had the opportunity to have access to real experts in the area, and then they made kind of decisions and judgments based on what they'd learned. And it was a great, sometimes you get, when you ask kind of for people's opinion on things, you don't always get a proper representation of the city. You get the opinions of almost the obsessives, as it were. You don't always get that cross section. And I think with the climate agenda, what we got was a real good deep dive into kind of every aspect of the city, so we could really kind of learn how different people were thinking, how they'd be affected by the decisions we'd made, and the recommendations they came out with. Some of them really aligned to what we were already thinking. Some of them were new and were quite kind of surprising that people had these as priorities. And I think that was such a great example of kind of canvassing that opinion and making sure that kind of regular people are heard right at the top of the council. So I think that's a great model to look at.
Yeah, Tracy?
Yeah, well, absolutely vital. Coming into the combined authority as the mayor, the way that we engage to help us make decisions has been online majoritatively, and the people that engage with us, 10% of the population and predominantly white men. So this is not the only voice we need to hear. So I'm really, one of my manifesto commitments was to appoint an inclusivity champion. So whoever is on this call, if you know anyone or you are the person that can help me make these inclusive choices, then please do apply for the job, 36,000 plus a year. But I was on a call yesterday with the Community Foundation and 70 charities, and listening to them and their concerns about the impact of the pandemic on their resources and their funding. But also I was able to thank them for what they've done, because hasn't the third sector stepped up where government particularly has failed? So whether that's rolling out testing, tracking and tracing in Bradford, the people talk about how brilliant Bradford were with that. Lots of volunteers involved, whether that's hot meals for hungry children in the way that the council stepped up with volunteer support, tech for kids that had no access to it, trying to identify where to get those tech items to kids, and the vaccination program. So much of that is delivered from volunteers and the third sector. So we have been carried by this sector that, because of COVID, has also turned the tap off their funding streams. So no London Marathon, no big galas and charitable fundraisers or dinners to raise money. So they have also lost funding, but we need them more than ever. So I'm determined to be accessible and to listen, because I think leadership is also about listening and listening to our communities. So I've set up a roadshow called Tell Tracy, and it will be attached to my 10 manifesto commitments. And I want to hear from communities that potentially are far away from the leadership of West Yorkshire, and to hear what you think about policing, what you think about housing, transport, about the safety of women and girls, and so on. So I'm really determined to be accessible, transparent, available, and to listen to those communities that are furthest away, because we can't make decisions for our community without us. And that's the message I was saying to government all along. We need to be, if you're a Hamilton fan, you'll know this quote, we need to be in the room where it happens. You can't make decisions about us without us. And that is the same for whether you're a disabled group of disabled activists, or whether that's you're a group of young mums or single dads. You know, you need to have access to decision makers to help us develop our thinking. And if we have an approach about inclusive growth, we need to know the lie of the land at the moment, so we know what to put in place. Really, really important.
Any meeting I have that quotes Hamilton is like a plus for the day. And with that, there's a million things we haven't done in Leeds. Laura Wellington, who has been absolutely amazing through the pandemic, doing a brilliant initiative for people who, you know, to thank key workers through art. And, you know, there's a really good question from Laura about support for those, you know, services and facilities that really do need to recover pre-2023 when we've got the cultural celebration coming. And I also think about, you know, just linking that to the development of the city. We've got, you know, great things happening down at Quarry Hill, but next to it is Mabgate. We're really keen that we don't get, you know, just luxury flats built out in Mabgate, but we do a really intensive piece of work to keep the creative sector in that part of the city, to link into Lincoln Green, you know, adjacent to it. Similarly, on the South Bank, we've got, I know that Laura and others have got some great ideas about how to make sure the South Bank is a really, you know, great, almost Northern European type development, you know, much more with culture at its heart, which is the consultation that we did. And anything on that agenda, Councillor Pryor, you might want to just talk about in terms of that, you know, how do we really support those organisations who are struggling, and we need to be there when we get to 2023?
I think kind of the importance of organisations to that is the character of the city. It's what gives the city its personality. I remember so I moved to Leeds about 11 years ago. I'm from Lancashire, I'm afraid. I've crossed the Pennines. But the one thing that happened quite early on in my time in Leeds that made me think, do you know what? This is where I want to live. This is where I want to build my life. Was I've been living in Leeds for a few months, and it was light night, and I didn't even know it was on. I just happened to be in town, and I stumbled across it, and it was phenomenal. Like, the atmosphere was incredible, and in one night, I just kind of felt a connection to the city, which just made me think, do you know what? I'm staying here for however long, and I think that's kind of what culture can do for a city. And I think hopefully that's what 2023 can really do, can really not create a personality, but show off the personality of Leeds, show kind of what we've got to offer. And you're absolutely right when you're talking about areas about like Mabgate, who've got incredible history in the arts. You know, so many people have gone through there, learnt, built lives around what that is. And I think as a city, we need to be making sure that we kind of protect those spaces. We make sure they're there for the next generation, and just keep that going completely.
Tracy, would you like?
Yeah, if I could just add, yeah, for me, what's really important is obviously culture is a massive part of our lives, and it's a great employer, and it's great for skills, etc. But fundamentally, my priority going forward is well-being, because it has been so horrendous. I think the opportunities to play, the opportunities to be with your family, the opportunities to forget for 90 minutes the challenges that you're facing, whether that's housing, money, whatever. And I see brilliant examples of that with Slung Low, for example, in Holbeck, and what they have done during the pandemic. providing food, but then also providing opportunities for fun and play. And it might be worth those on the call knowing that the structures of the combined authority is that there's a committee structure that makes decisions about transport, about housing, planning, regeneration. But I didn't feel that culture had its rightful place. So, and priority given well-being was going to be so important when we're facing what I think is going to be a tsunami of poor mental health. So I've set up a culture committee and we've already allocated 500,000 to that committee to look at how we create playful city centres, for example, where when businesses are looking at hybrid working, where is the footfall in our city centres? Why are people coming to our city centres? Is it only Monday to Friday? Or can we make the offer wider so that you have an opportunity to bring your family as a tourist almost, to play in the fountains, to then have a picnic, to go and see an outdoor art exhibition, to play on that funny sculpture that's open to the public, and to be together as a family and to get some respite from the tough difficulties of COVID. So I think well-being is going to be really important. That's why social prescribing is something I'm very interested in, using creative practitioners and developing that social prescribing model across our region. An opportunity to employ those youngsters who are setting out on a career only to be hijacked by COVID, have no chance or hope of getting back into it. Potentially this is a way to employ them in the thing they were trained to do, but working with dementia sufferers or those with poor mental health or lonely or isolated. There's lots of opportunities we can use that creative offer, not just for the convening and bringing people together in this experience, but also to help our well-being and our mental health. And we see great examples around the region, but we can't miss out towns and villages as well. So that's also my challenge, to make sure that this offer is wide across West Yorkshire.
Yeah, I totally agree about. Rob's made a really good point about music, the music scene in Leeds on the chat, and certainly for me, my own mental health has been helped enormously by music over the years, and I and my family's as well, and played a really important part in that. And when I think about Chapel FM in Seacroft and the role that they've played to help connect young people up and older people up to to music opportunities. There's some great work going on with Whiskers and others in the city, but obviously more we can learn from other cities. Do you want to comment on that, Councillor Pryor?
In terms of the music scene, do you mean? Yeah. I have to say it's you're right, and you kind of talk about that relationship that people have with music, and the thing I think about is how people have got through lockdown as well. You talk about the stressful experiences people have had, and what was more stressful than the past year and a half, and the things that got people through when they were shut away in their homes was music, it was performance, it was the amount of, we've had a huge amount of our theatres who've put plays on kind of catch-up services, even just some things like binge watching on Netflix. It has been different elements of culture that kind of got people through, which I think actually really showed kind of a bit of humanity almost. This is, Tracy mentioned that kind of culture is sometimes something that's dismissed, and it's the first thing to be cut from schools and similar things to that. But actually, it's what we went to as a society, as a go-to when we were at our most kind of difficult period.
If I could just add as well, just to that it's also about identity and belonging. So our campaign when I was the Shadow Culture Minister, to keep venues open, to open them as soon as we can. Because, for example, if you're a young kid that's queer in West Yorkshire, and your venue where you go, your club where you go, where you feel part of a family, has been closed for 15 months, it's really important that these venues bringing people together. It's the same in sport, you know, supporting a team. Leeds United is an identity, in a sense. It gives you a sense of belonging to a group. Being queer in Yorkshire and being part of that scene, and that being closed to you, really, really super hard over the last few years, last few months. And I think that's why our venues and our our little venues and our rooms above the pub, and you know, the live rooms in Cleckheaton that unfortunately closed. You know, it's really important we keep our music venues open, you know, safely, of course, but open if we can. But also that's why I'm leading the campaign for Channel 4 to keep its remit as for us, and we don't even pay for it, but the fact that they commission work from production companies, 50% of their commissioning has to come from the regions and nations, and that benefits all of us. So having Channel 4 here really gives us that identity as well, and is an incubator, helps us incubate talent, because we've got somewhere to take it, because those production companies that are set up around Channel 4 now are desperate for product. And it is that, that intellectual property that is so important, that we get those working class voices, those working class stories, those, you know, those musicians and writers and artists having the opportunity to be part of it, because we need that diversity of offer to companies like Channel 4. And Channel 4 coming to Leeds was such an amazing moment, and I'm hugely proud that it's come to Yorkshire, and I will do everything in my power to make sure it stays as distinctive as it should be, and it's what we bid for, it's what we want to continue supporting. So it's also about our identity across West Yorkshire, culture, but also bringing in those big companies, inward investment, training opportunities, and it raises our gaze as well, and raises our ambition for our region. So I'm hugely proud of our cultural offer.
And I think, you know, Channel 4 is a great example of when we have that strength of identity, when we have that just having such an incredible and interesting city, places like people like Channel 4 want to come and work here in Leeds. You know, they want to produce here, and I think that kind of shows how some of this becomes kind of circular in quite a positive way, and hopefully we can just build on this more and more and more.
Yeah, I agree with that. I having been involved in the, you know, the talks and the work afterwards, that's what they bought into. That, you know, lots of people sold similar stories as ours, but they didn't connect with them in the way that we did. And we have a great, I think, set of ambitions around particular diversity, and, you know, the indies, you know, development, and that sense of, you know, the projection of the North across our TV screens and our iPads, etc., you know, was really fundamental. We're coming towards the end of the session, and I can't not talk about football, but I think there's some really interesting lessons from, you know, the way Gareth Southgate has led the England team over the last few years. And you know, when Jordan Henderson scored the other night, he had rainbow laces on. You've got Marcus Rashford and the role that he's played, you know, on Free School Meals. You've got Raheem Sterling standing up to racism at a time actually when it was a real tipping point, when he really was brave and stood out. At the time, you know, they've continued to take the knee despite, you know, the booing that happened, and, you know, the Mason Mount going into the crowd last night and giving the little girl his shirt. You know, there's something about the way that team has been brought together, and the squad. You know, the fact that none of them are, you know, are sort of getting upset because they're not playing. You know, it's, for us as a city, I think there's such a good parallel there, and I wonder if you might want to, you know, finish by reflecting on that in terms of the team we're trying to build here, where people have felt a bit excluded from some of the way the economy has developed, and you know, can we take some lessons from that? Maybe Councillor Pryor first.
Yeah, I mean, look, kind of sports stars are the sort of icons, the sort of role models that we as politicians and business leaders and everyone else in this call can only dream of reaching. You know, they'll have a connection with people across the country and young people across the country, which is so unique. And actually seeing such kind of a decent group of lads who have really kind of championed that inclusivity, to kind of get everyone involved, to actually fight for some really decent causes as well, has been fantastic. And do you know what, like, there are, without being too political, there are some not very good role models out there, and actually to see the England team come forward as these real champions of everything we should be and everything we should represent as a country has genuinely been so inspiring. I'm not someone who particularly follows football, but this past, you know, the past few weeks has actually even drawn me in. I've had to have Councillor Lewis sat next to me explaining what's going on sometimes. But yeah, to me, who's not been that into it, like to be kind of drawn in as well. I think they are bringing the country together in a way that we really need.
Well, certainly when you've got the sports stars leading the government on how to behave, when you have the Prime Minister saying, well, it's right for fans to boo players taking the knee because it's about sport, not about racism, and then having to pivot in the same way that Priti Patel did as well, that they're now backing England, and Conservative MPs saying, I'm not watching the sport because I think they're foolish for taking the knee. We have to kick racism out of sport. They are leading on it. And when you have a manager who one of his first concerns was those that were left out and were not on, had their moment to play for England, that is the sort of leadership I find inspiring. And that's the sort of leader I want to be, that is about not just those who are, sharp elbows and at the front, but those who have a lot to give, who potentially haven't had their voices heard, and really brilliant leadership. And certainly those young men, when they're interviewed as well, they've played phenomenally. They could be giddy, and yet they come across so mature and sensible and determined to win, and kind, more than anything, really kind. And what great role models for our youngsters going forward. Kindness is very undervalued in our community.
I think I completely agree with that, Tracy. I think kindness is the most underrated leadership quality, and I don't think it's all about a soft thing. It's about respect, and about certainly, if I think about my last 10 years in the council, trying to be empathetic, trying to understand where people are coming from, recognising that everybody's an individual and should have a voice in an organisation and in a city, is something that I think we've tried to bring into the council. And I think it's been at the heart of our, the things that we've done best over the last few years. And people pay it back in spades when you give them that sort of respect and kindness. And I think it makes a huge difference. We're so pleased to have you as the first female Metro Mayor, and the first Mayor of West Yorkshire. And I'm really excited about the future of us working together. I cannot tell you the number of meetings I've been in talking about devolution over the last 10 years, and I'm determined to be glass half full permanently about devolution in the next few years, because we've got it now, and we've got to make it happen and get that flexibility we've been given, that extra 38 million we've been given a year by the government to really make a difference. And it's great to have you here today, Tracy, and spending the time with us. And I've got to say, with you and Councillor Pryor, I just think it shows how far we've come as a city, that we can talk about the economy, and the discussion has included music, kindness, Hamilton, and Gareth Southgate.
And football, yes, indeed.
Yes, this is the future. My work is done, and I'm going to hand back to Nigel. Thank you.
Thanks, Tom, and thanks, Tracy and Jonathan. I'm not quite sure how I'm going to summarise that at the end. Fortunately, I've got a bit of time in between, but I've got to say that was very, very uplifting, very positive, and I'm hopefully, we can't see everyone, but it's got people smiling as well, which is fantastic. What a great way to start the day. I'd like to just now move on to talk about the city plan. We've got Simon Foy, who's the head of intelligence and policy at Leeds City Council, and Mike Eakins, who's the intelligence and policy manager at the council. And they're going to give us a brief summary about their plans for developing the new city plan. So can I hand over to you, if that's okay, Simon? And as before, if you've got any questions or comments, please put them in the chat, and I'm sure we'll be able to get back to you after the event. Thank you.
Thank you, Nigel, and good morning, everybody. And I came in on the back of that previous session, and I think I found it very inspiring. And I think what Mike and I are going to talk about is perhaps slightly might appear more mundane, but is about how we actually harness, put some framework around that innovation and energy and ambition, even more than we have been doing. So that's what we're here to talk about. So Mike and I want to share with you our very earliest thinking about proposals that we're developing on in a shift towards perhaps a more formalised city plan for Leeds. And I guess before I even get in this, and Mike's going to talk us through the nuts and bolts of where we've got up to in a moment, but in way of introduction, I guess the first thing is to stress that clearly we're not talking about working from a blank canvas. The discussion, this previous discussion, kind of really highlights the wealth of innovation and ambition and partnership and agreement and some real will to kind of make a difference. That the point of the thing we're going to be talking about is, in simple terms, how we even more effectively perhaps harness it. So I suppose to kick it off, partnership and prioritization across the city is increasingly about shared goals and ambitions, about how we collectively maximize our assets and our resources and our spend for the collective good of the city. And I think our response to COVID, both individually as organizations and networks and collectively, has highlighted how that collaboration can even bring more effective outcomes to the city. However, there's a bit of an oddity in that the city's overarching ambitions as kind of manifest as a strong economy, compassionate city, zero carbon, are actually set out in something called the Best Council Plan, which is set within the council's kind of strategic framework. So the intention is to further shift towards an overarching ambition or a set of shared priorities, or perhaps a strategic intent that is more explicitly shaped by partners and more clearly aligned to our kind of collective goals. So Mike's going to share with you where we've got up to. Mike.
Thanks, Simon. If you just bear with me. Hi, everyone. I'm just going to present my screen, and I've got a very short PowerPoint presentation to run through, if this will work. Okay. So a new city plan for Leeds, and I'm just going to run through sort of why we think now's the right time to do that, what we expect it might cover in headline terms, and then I suppose the path that we're proposing we go on. And I'll just sort of qualify all of this at the outset with there's a balance obviously to be struck here between wanting to really meaningfully and genuinely engage with the city and with our partners, but also wanting not, to start with more than a blank piece of paper. So we've taken some liberties here to try and shape some of this, but obviously I'll touch on the end in terms of next steps and emphasize that we're at the very, very early stages of this conversation, and that there's plenty more to go and lots of engagement to be done. But in terms of why we think now's the right time, I suppose one of the biggest reasons really is looking at what we've just been through the pandemic, and everybody will have had their own probably unique experience in some way, but there are some themes that have really come out through this period. One has been more strong than ever before, really good multi-agency partnership working across the city with organisations and community groups and third sector businesses all coming together and sort of pulling in the same direction. And we've seen that city coming together at all levels with, you know, communities supporting one another. I know some of the people on this call have done some amazing things in different communities across the city over this period to help support those who were struggling or were perhaps facing some tougher challenges than others over this time. And then there's probably a much broader sense now, you know, more than before, of the value in really promoting public health. And again, we've seen some routes come to the fore which we can engage with people about their health and about broader public health messaging in a different way moving forward as a result of some of the things that have been put in place over the last 18 months. So capturing all of that, you know, it's difficult to sort of talk about the positives of a pandemic, but capturing all of those positive things that have emerged in terms of how we work as a city is really central to this. Moving on from that, you know, as a council, we've got a relatively new still council leadership, so that naturally presents an opportunity from our point of view to refresh our vision and ambitions for the city and to take stock of our challenges that we've got, but also the strengths too. And there's a few bits of work going on in the background, which I won't dwell on, but the 2021 Joint Strategic Assessment is due to conclude very shortly. The council's been running its own COVID-19 lessons learned exercise, and I know other organisations will have done the same. So there's lots of learning to gather there to inform this next period. And more generally, we've obviously just heard from Tracy, but and Tracy coming into post is one part of sort of significant and ongoing change we've got across the city, with further changes in the health sector and the integration with social care. The council and other organisations will have their own ongoing budget challenges, and then there's just a level of uncertainty as well about the economy and also just our society. Some of those live debates going on in the public now about how we move forward as a society and what we expect from each other. More, I suppose, broadly, there are some longer term issues here. One is how we position Leeds nationally and internationally in terms of attracting investment into the city, both inward investment from abroad, but also sort of investment from government, and positioning ourselves to bid for funding. We do know with the current government, there's no indication this will change. They tend to prefer a sort of competitive bidding process for allocating funding. So we need to make sure we're as well placed as we can be. And we think an overarching strategic intent that we're all sort of signed up to will help us to do that. And also to restate our ambition on the international stage as well. You know, we want Leeds to be a leading city internationally, and capturing our collective sense of what we're about and what we're trying to achieve will help us to do that. And within that, responding to some of those unique challenges we have, and that unique mix of challenges we have at the moment, which everyone will be familiar with. So what will it cover? And Simon's just touched on, we'd like this really to capture our shared strategic intent of the council and all our partners across the city. So signalling our collective direction and also setting out how everyone can play their part in achieving that. Some of that is in our existing, if you like, strategic ambitions, but there's definitely lots of opportunities to strengthen it. And I'm sure everyone on this call will have things that immediately come to mind that they feel could be better, could be strengthened. So that's what we want to focus on. Keen to look at whether we can establish some shared ambitions or even more specific targets as a city, very much building on things that we are already all working towards. So this isn't, the intention of this is not to come up with a brand new set of things that we're going to expect everyone to sign up to. It's as much as anything trying to capture the ambitions we all already have around areas like diversity, equality and net zero carbon. But perhaps taking that a little bit further and taking the opportunity to set out what we as a city think we can do ourselves. You know, Leeds does have this spirit of, you know, being a city that just gets on really, that's quite self-sufficient. We don't massively rely on government. We don't massively rely on a small number of large private sector organisations. We're quite well spread across sectors, and that's been a strength of the city over the last decade or so. And so important that we hold on to that. But yeah, really capturing what can we do, and then with the right external support, whether that's from government or from business or from other sources, how could we take that further? And within that, this is something that we're keen to discuss, but we're quite keen to look at whether we structure that around this 3 pillars narrative that the council has had for the last few years. And obviously we're here as part of the Inclusive Growth Partnership, which is obviously really well established now. We've got a similar picture across health and wellbeing and climate change that we see as our other 2 big pillars. But recognizing that there's a big opportunity to strengthen the community aspect of all of this, and this is something we've really seen through the pandemic. But the way we work with communities, the way we work in communities, the way we empower communities, and a whole range of issues around sort of the value of community and community pride in the city. People feeling proud to come from Leeds, proud of what's going on in their community, is something that's really come to the fore. And through doing that, hopefully we can tell the story of the city in a more holistic way, in a way that people can genuinely relate to. And then just to finish off there, sort of touching on the positioning element that I mentioned a minute ago. This is about maximising the resources we have within the city and bringing additional resources in, and also capturing the style of leadership that we think is needed to drive at these shared ambitions, and how we need to come together. And for us as a council, there's some reflection there as well about what our role is moving forward, and we're certainly quite keen to draw on a piece of work done remarkably a decade ago now, so sort of well before my time at the council, but something through the Commission on the Future of Local Government that set out a future vision for what local government leadership looked like, and lots of themes in there about sort of civic enterprise, and actually sometimes it being right for the council to step back. So 10 years on, a lot of that work still feels perhaps remarkably relevant, so there's an opportunity to refresh some of that as well. Excuse me. So this diagram tries to set out in relatively simple terms the process that I think we're going on, and there are a whole range of inputs to this work. I've touched on a couple already around lessons learned review from COVID, around the joint strategic assessment, but just broader partnership conversations that need to happen will feed into us trying to set out some key questions, key issues for the city, some so whats, if you like, and to agree how they then shape some principles of a city plan. Moving in through from then onwards, and starting that very, very soon, to be honest, to much broader engagement across the city with all of you on this call, with the education sector, young people, business, third sector, cultural organisations, right the way across, keen to talk to everybody really, and to gather those views, with the intention that by the end of this year, beginning of next year, we're in a position to start putting forward, I suppose, something that people can have a look at and hopefully feel represents what they've fed in and what's important to them. Just to say as well, towards the end of this year, it mentions there in number 3, we'll hold a State of the City event. Obviously, pending where we are with towards the end of this year as we head into the winter with COVID-19 and restrictions and what's possible and what's not. But being optimistic, hopefully we'll be able to hold a city summit where everyone can come together to discuss all of these issues. So just finally, sort of, how can you get involved in this? And as I say, we're at the really, really early stages. So this today is very much just, I suppose, giving a heads up of our intention to come out and engage further. We're engaging before the engagement to some extent, but wanted to make people aware that this is coming down the line and hopefully get some of those thoughts going across partners. So we want to hear what you think. We want to hear your ambitions, your priorities for Leeds, to help shape this work. And particularly, I've touched on what we want to do here is try not to just engage with the usual suspects, and to really reach out into communities, and particularly to those people who will have lived experience of those issues which we say are our priority. So the council's current strategic ambition is all shaped around tackling poverty and reducing inequalities. So we really want to engage with people affected by these issues, and what we say we're going to do really needs to resonate with those people that yeah, this is what's needed, and I do feel that we're making progress. So if through any established networks or forums or engagement that you have planned, you can help us to engage both with partner organisations and partners in the city and also with the community, please do get in touch, and we're really keen to work with you on that. And we'll keep in touch as this progresses. We'll keep sharing information with this group. I said it's very early. We will have some sort of central point for people to send thoughts and feelings and proposals into. We're not quite there yet though. So in the interim, if you do want to get in touch and want to have a chat about this, feel free to get in touch with me directly in the first instance. And that'd be brilliant. But I'll wrap up there and stop sharing my screen. And what I haven't done is kept an eye on the chat at all. But Simon, I don't know if you've had a quick eye on the chat for any questions. Let me just have a quick look.
Mike, it's Nigel. I've just picked up one from Rob Wolf, which I thought was an interesting one, and that refers to the 5 capitals models as opposed to the 3 pillars that we've currently got. And just wondered, what your thoughts were on that.
Thanks for that, Rob. Yeah, I mean, happy to have a look at that. As I say, we've taken the 3 pillars as our starting point, as something that we'd already sort of established within the council, and we felt through the Inclusive Growth Partnership and the Health and Wellbeing Board and the Climate Commission felt logical. But nothing here is set in stone at this stage. So yeah, happy to take a closer look at that and have a discussion about that for sure. So, just sorry, bear with me as I'm just scrolling through this.
There's also some things around both kind of grassroots engagement or bottom up rather than top down, I think, in there. And there's also having a really good, clear, agreed and honest starting point for the challenges facing the city before we embark on this. And again, I guess in terms of responding to that, there's a few things there. We're currently working on something, it's a terrible name, but something called the Joint Strategic Assessment, which is it's a kind of socio-economic and increasingly environmental analysis of the city, which we have been working with a whole range of stakeholders in producing. And again, we're so early in the stage, we're still at the working draft of that piece of work as well. But we envisage that the fulmination of that city analysis over the next few weeks will also be a key input into the kind of early conversations around the nature of the ambition and the nature of the city plan. And in terms of top down and bottom up, again, we're absolutely determined to have really effective engagement at all levels across the city. This isn't a very limited and narrow conversation between a few key institutions. It's got to be a much more wider and meaningful conversation. And as part of that, when we're looking at the analysis, the kind of starting point for the discussion, not only are we just looking at kind of the normal empirical stuff that we get from the ONS and the economic and data, we're trying to kind of draw on the lived experience of people in the city and how we can kind of capture that in terms of an input into how we chart a way forward as well. So that's going to be quite a big part of what we hope to achieve.
Just picking up on the comment there as well about small is beautiful too, and let's not forget small businesses and charities and community groups. Yeah, completely agree, and you're right. That engagement is often slightly more difficult than just going to the same old big partners, if you like. But you're right, it's absolutely vital, and we need to make sure that we do that. And as I say, if we'll be making efforts to do that ourselves, but if partners and people on this call through their networks or have got roots or people you really think we should speak to, please do let us know and help us out with that. I suppose there's a bit of an ask there and a bit of an ask for help in making those connections.
And Mike, it's Nigel. I think that's a really good point. I mean, I was involved in the transport conversation, and engagement and consultation is never easy when you're trying to reach out to a very diverse group of people in the city. But I think there's some good examples that Leeds have been pursuing recently, and I think the real efforts that you've outlined with Simon today is you want people to participate, you want people's involvement and engagement, and you're looking at every way you can maximize that. So I think that's a really encouraging place. Simon, do you want to anything else you want to do before we wrap up on this?
Well, I mean, a couple of things. One is finishing, starting where Mike finished, in terms of we're really keen. This is, I say, engagement before the engagement was a good way of putting it, Mike, actually. So the earliest stages, we're keen to hear how we can set off on the right foot when we do the wider engagement. So if people have views about how we might do that and what a good starting point might be to help shape that further engagement, that's one thing. And the second thing is an offer. If there are networks or discussions you're having, we'd be delighted to come along and get involved and utilize, you know, the output and the outcomes from those networks as a key input into this work going forward. So please get in touch if you know, invite us to things that you think would be helpful. We'd be delighted to kind of contribute. And also, of course, thank you for your time this morning.
That's great. I think, Simon, that's fantastic. Thanks, Mike, as well. It's good, as you say, to be involved earlier. I think Laura Wellington in the chat has talked about co-creation. I think that's exactly what you and Mike are really meaning. You know, you want people to be involved in helping shape and develop this plan. So I think that's really, really good. Really good. Thank you.
Real, thanks very much.
Thank you.
I look forward to seeing you in the future and giving us an update. Eve, I'm just going to go to you a second. Is there anything you want to add? Because we've had a really rich discussion today. And before I sum up, we've got a few minutes spare because everybody's kept to time, which is amazing, given we've covered so much. Is there anything you want to sort of add to today's conversation?
I think just to really thank people for their time and contributions. I was during the discussion, I was following the comments in the chat and the Q&A, and to underline really that I'm hopeful that the next one of these events we can maybe try and return to an in-person format. I think there's a richness in the debate that we're possibly missing a little at the moment, where these events previously we've had some very successful and informative breakout sessions where people have been able to get to understand more about particular topics and to debate and connect with colleagues across the city. And it feels to me that that's a really important thing for us to be able to do the next time we come together. So we'll try and explore making that happen. But to really say thank you for everyone for joining us, and also thank you to the team behind the scenes from my team at the council who've done a lot of legwork to make sure that today's event went smoothly. So thank you.
Yeah, can I echo that as well? I mean, I think the team at the council's been tremendous in not just organising this event today, but also all the other work that you and your team are doing, Eve, and it came across really strongly today. I thought it was fantastic. I think I'd also wanted to add as well the point that you've made. This is really about, there's about 100 people who have participated today, but it's important that everybody who's participated shares it with their networks and relationships across the city, because it needs to be a citywide. And it picks up on Laura's point about co-creation. You know, this is a citywide thing that we're trying to achieve here, and we won't achieve it unless everybody's joining in with us. So I think that's really critical. How do I sum up a day, a session like today's? With great difficulty. I will finish on football, even though I know that quite a lot of people on the call won't be interested necessarily in the football bit. But I think the Mayor, Councillor Pryor and Tom really presented a very, very compelling vision. And I think when, Eve, you were presenting your part, you showed that actually we're on with some of that vision already, and it's a very, very big area to cover, but we're already making some really good progress. So I think the council and I think its partners have demonstrated a really strong commitment to a positive future for both Leeds and West Yorkshire, and for everyone. I think that diverse and comprehensive approach is really shone through in all of the conversation and presentation today. It's hard, as we know. But I think everybody's committed to it, and that's really, really important. We also know it's a complex set of issues that's going to face the economy. We've had a difficult 18 months with COVID, and we're not quite out of it yet. So this isn't just about post-COVID, though. This is also about all the underlying and structural changes that the economy is going through, whether it's about digital or whether it's about climate change. So we need to work together to achieve this. And so I think this is a really big call, a continuing call for partnership. That's really what you're saying, isn't it, Eve? That together we've got the best chance of creating the best outcomes for everyone, and we need everyone to pull together to do that. So I think that partnership is absolutely vital. I think the football analogy that came out from everyone, which everyone signed up to, I think goes, as they said, far beyond football. I think they were showing real leadership outside of their professional lives. So the things that Marcus Rashford has been doing and others have been doing around diversity, around inclusivity and around fairness have been, I think, taken a real beacon to what can be done by people in those positions. But I think it's incumbent on all of us to do that. And I think that's what the Inclusive Growth Partnership is all about. And so if we can do more of that, that will be fantastic. What Eve also said is that when we've been holding these meetings virtually for pretty much 18 months now, but we would like to get back to them in person, because I think, as Eve said, it adds a real richness to the discussion. It creates that sort of innovation conversation that you don't always get in a 2-hour Zoom session. So the next event we're planning for the Extended Delivery Partnership is on the Tuesday, the 16th of November. We don't know where that's going to be at the moment, Eve, do we? We haven't got a venue for that. And we haven't got an agenda, but we're working on that. But if you can put the 16th of November in your diary, that's when we're hoping to get together and, you know, welcome old friends and new friends together somewhere in Leeds. And we'll be continuing to communicate through the Twitter feed and through the website and through all of the other activities that Eve has talked about today. But if you've got any questions, you want to raise points, I'm sure that if you email the team, then we'll get back to you and we can work out how best to involve you in some of the things that's going on. So on that note, with 3 minutes to spare, that will give people a bit of time to go back and either make a cup of tea or go to the loo or whatever else. But I'd like to say thanks to Eve, thanks to all of our panelists, Jonathan, Tom, and Tracy, and also to Mike and Simon for their presentation. And I hope you all have a fantastic day, and we look forward to seeing you soon. Thank you. Bye-bye.